Hello, welcome once again to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a bespectacled Charles Coulombe.
Bespectacled?
Yeah, you got some fancy new glasses that everyone seems to enjoy.
Well, firstly, I'm happy they're enjoying them. They are not new glasses, I'll have you know. They were a spare pair. My regular glasses broke. So, and I'm still having trouble reading with these, but I'm getting used to them. I've got to get to an optician after the pandemic, of course.
Yeah. But people like them. The people like the style of them.
No, not everybody.
Not everybody? Well, who doesn't like it?
My pal Axel said it made me look like Heinrich Himmler.
Wow. I could see that.
Yeah, well, my answer to him, because he's German, my answer to him was that I'm going native.
Yes, a slow transformation.
Very, bit by bit, you see, I shall become a complete Central European. I will become one of these brilliant, unbelievable speakers, academics, who will come back to the States and be impossible to understand. But you will know, because of the brilliance of what I say, that I am a foreigner. Now, the fact that my German sounds as strange to German ears as this does to English ears does not change the fact that I should be hailed as a brilliant foreign lecturer, a genius driven from his home country by, I don't know, maybe the pandemic. At any rate, whatever it was that drove me to the United States, I should make a fortune on the lecture circuit, talking about my experiences as a refugee, despite being a brilliant scientist or something. You are not impressed by my all-purpose Central European accent?
I guess it is all-purpose, isn't it? Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
You know what made me laugh?
What?
I was putting this out in front of a mixed group of Central Europeans, and they were all trying to figure out where in Central Europe I was from. But one who was perhaps smarter than the average bear, as you say in your country, said, it is sort of a mishmash of things. To my ear, it sounds like something from the casting lot at the Hollywood studio.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
That's good.
So I was kind of put in my place, as you might say. Well, it's authentic enough. He says, of course, it's authentic enough for a Hollywood movie. You could be Dr. Van Helsing.
Gosh, that guy's kind of brutal.
Yeah, well, they tend to be brutal here, you know. They don't take a lot of garbage. That's why Orban is running Hungary and what's his name is running Poland. These guys, I mean, they don't fool around in Central Europe. They don't have time, you know.
Okay. So what's new, Charles?
Well, we have loosened up somewhat here in Austria. There are public masses once more. Although you've got to sit apart from everyone unless you're with your family members, and you've got to wear a mask to mass, which you can only remove when you're receiving. Similarly, when you go to restaurants now, you have to wear a mask when you go in, but you can take it off when you're seated at your table.
I don't think that makes sense.
Do you know the phrase kabuki?
The phrase kabuki? No.
The word kabuki.
I've heard of
It's
it.
a style of Japanese dance, very symbolic. It's not, how do I put it? Kabuki is not straightforward. Kabuki is all symbolic.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of this stuff is like kabuki. It symbolizes our dislike of the pandemic and our wish it would go away.
So we're wearing masks as a symbolic gesture that we don't like this, and it doesn't really matter, but we don't like this.
We don't like this. We and our masters don't like it either. Go away, pandemic. Go away. What I think a lot of it, not everything, and believe me, I'm not what you would call doctrinaire on this topic. If anything, I'm very agnostic about the measures that have been taken around the globe to try to deal with the thing. I don't know. But I'm reminded of so much of the stuff reminds me of the advice that a psychologist gave Californians. And what he told them was, when you're in an earthquake, which, as you know, we have from time to time, you found your place of safety, in a door jamb or something, and the place is shaking. Go like this. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Now, of course, earthquakes don't last long, so it will stop. And in the meantime, it gives you a feeling of some control over what's going on. Well, all these regulations certainly give the rulership the feeling that they're doing something and that they have some sort of control over it all. And it makes us subjects kind of happy, at least a lot of us, because we're being looked out for, and those in the know are issuing instructions for our well-being.
Did a psychologist really say that? Did he really say that?
What's that?
Did a psychologist really give that advice?
About the shaking the finger? Yeah.
It's saying stop it.
Yeah. You'll feel like you're in control. I mean, what's the biggest part of your fear in an earthquake? It's the total lack of control, the fact that the earth is shaking you around, and all that. But if you do that, as I say, it'll stop. If you don't get killed, it'll stop you pretty quick. It'll stop, and then you could, on a very deep psychological level, you'll feel as though you can control it, and you'll feel better.
I don't know. Californians honestly don't fear earthquakes. My reaction is, ooh, an earthquake. This is cool.
Well, I'll tell you, I've never really enjoyed them, but the last one I was in, which is, 2008, the summer of 2008, there was a good trembler in the San Gabriel Valley. And as it so happened, I was going into the late lamented Bahuka for my lunch. And I had just locked the car door. And suddenly I noticed that the car was moving. And I thought, have I left it on? But I hadn't. I had the key in my hand. And then I looked and I saw that the signs were moving. And I myself was doing this sort of weird twist thing. And I realized this is what an earthquake is like outdoors when you're awake. Because, I've always been in bed for just about every quake I've ever lived through.
Yeah, I've never noticed one outdoors.
Well, this one I noticed. And it was really interesting. And then when the shake finished, I went into the Bahuka. Boy, do I miss that place.
Yeah.
And ordered my delicious Polynesian lunch with a double Mai Tai.
Nice. Huh. Yeah, I don't think we mind earthquakes. California did something crazy yesterday. It scared the hell out of me. To celebrate frontline workers on the pandemic, they had like this air show with all these jets. And I'm just sitting in my office at home, and it sounds like there is an airplane that is literally going to crash into my house.
Oof.
It was so loud and terrifying. I actually got up instantly and ran out because I thought something was going to crash through the wall.
Gosh.
And it ended up being one of these show fighter jets. And it was only like several hundred feet off the air, off the ground.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen one that close before. So immediately my instant reaction from going outside is, okay, I need to check the news, because I sure as hell hope that it's a show going on and that we're not at war with somebody.
Well, yeah, that would have been very unfortunate, being at war.
And thank goodness KTLA Channel 7 was on, and they were covering it and said, "Oh yeah, we're going off all around LA County to celebrate the workers." And I was like, little notice might have been nice. Like, I don't know if that got the reaction that they intended.
Well, there's a lot of this that's unintended. I mean, as you know, we were talking before the show about the new lingo and the words you want to drop. I think we should, for the sake of our audience, go through a selection of words that all of us have to try to excise from our language as soon as the pandemic is over. You want to start?
It will never be over, Charles, because we're living in a new normal.
There's the first one. The new normal. Social distancing.
Oh my gosh.
Science and data.
That was the one I meant. I'm so sick of... We're going to be guided by science and data. All of our actions... You know what that is? That's like the secular version of some of these prelates I see, where it's like, well, we're guided by the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
You can't just say that. Like, oh, well,
you
okay,
can.
So that means that what you did was the right move, I guess.
Well, yeah, because you were guided by science and data, not by politics. That's the implication. Let's see. People love these empty phrases.
We're in this together.
That's another one we could really do without. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Yeah.
I mean, how am I supposed to react to that? The virus isn't hanging out on street corners waiting to beat people up. That's not actually how it works.
I love the imagery that just created. Like, I actually just pictured the virus hanging out on street corners waiting to beat people up.
Yeah, that's what it does. And that's how, stay safe. Stay away from that virus. Tell you what, it gets in heads, you're going to smack you around. Old virus, don't play by the rules, Kick you in the alley and leave you for dead is what they do. No, I mean, the whole thing is, let's put it this way. There's a great deal of absurdity that's endemic to the human condition. People forget that. And one of the best videos I've seen about the pandemic shows this woman she's got a bunch of microphones in front of her, and she says, I'm calling this conference so that we can share the information that you all need to go through this time. And she says, things like, we've got to protect our old people, so we have to stay away from them and isolate them, unless, of course, we need to help them by getting them food and medicine, which, however, we should bring to them while remaining completely isolated. And it was all like that, it says, and remember that you should wear masks, except that you shouldn't. And, it was all this stuff. It was very funny. I was in tears by the end of it. And then she ends up by saying, please give this video as much circulation as you can, because this is information everyone needs to know. Yeah, well, that's true. But I think, believe it or not, oh heavens, what was his name? He's a Jewish comedian, very, very funny.
Jackie Mason?
No, not Jackie. He was very funny too. Oh gosh, what was his name? His big claim to fame was, if you knew Susie like I know Susie. Oh, I feel so bad because I know them as well as my own.
Jerry Stiller just died.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
But this guy's a lot older. Why can't I remember his name? This is really embarrassing. Eddie Cantor. Oh, gosh.
Wow, that's really old.
Well, yeah, because I'm a really old guy. But Eddie Cantor, he was very, very funny, and in a kind of a gallows humor sort of way. And I remember listening to a radio broadcast, not at the time, of course, but online, from 1929, just after the crash, and he lost a lot. He really did lose a lot of money, and he said it's gotten so difficult now that when a man checks into a hotel and asks for a room on the 8th floor, the desk lady will say, "Will you be staying overnight with us, sir, or just jumping?"
Oh my gosh.
And he ended the thing by saying, by touching on his own troubles. They said, "But I'm not worried, though. I know my friends will carry me. At least the 6 of them will be pallbearers."
Oh my gosh, that guy is morbid.
Yeah, it's very funny. Eddie Cantor.
Wow. Wow.
If you knew Susie like I know Susie. And it was funny. I know a fellow who's an Eddie Cantor imitator, an impressionist. And he is incredible in terms of his imitation of Eddie Cantor. Well, he was invited by, yes, it exists, the International Eddie Cantor Society. So he went to New York. He was brought out there by the International Eddie Cantor Society. And where do they put him up but at the home of Eddie Cantor's daughter? He had Cantor's voice down so well that she kept asking him to repeat different phrases of her father's. And she said, I never thought I'd hear it said that way again. She was a very old woman at that time, but she was very, very happy. Anyway, there's an Eddie Cantor reminiscence for you. How often do you get that on the show?
Well, that's a first.
See? I think it's time to restore Eddie Cantor's appeal for the 21st century.
Great. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's bring back vaudeville too while we're at it.
Yeah. And in 2 years, we're going to have the centennial of Kaiser Karl. But in 3 years, you know what we're having the centennial of?
What?
The Charleston. Yes. And I think that once this pandemic is through, America and the world are going to be ready to Charleston. Yes. Bum, 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 bum. Yep. Everybody, it's going to hit the States and Europe. Girls will be running around in fringe dresses with headbands and feathers and cloche hats. Oh, it's going to be great. The new Roaring Twenties. Absolutely.
Okay. Let's move into the memes of production. We've got just 2 memes. Okay, first one is from the Babylon Bee. This is a very popular one recently. It just came out. How to Solve All Problems, a government-funded study. Robot uprising, give government more power. Murder hornets, give government more power. Starbucks gets your order wrong, give government more power. It's got all these other ones. Pandemic, problems caused by government, Crocs, orc invasion, bear attacks, Disney ruining beloved franchises, people disagreeing with you, rising fascism, rising communism. What do you think about this, Charles?
I'm sorry?
What do you think about this, Charles?
I think that they're absolutely right. If there's any problem, the government alone can solve it. And only the government should be allowed to try. I mean, I've realized that ever since I got my $1,200 stimulus check. I'm now very much in favor of heavy government intervention. At least the kind of intervention that results in a check in my mailbox.
One caveat with the meme for Babylon Bee for how to solve all problems, I wish this Disney ruining beloved franchises and resulting in giving the government more power, I wish that was actually true. The government needs to get involved on some of these things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, orc invasions come to mind.
No, Disney, not orc invasion. Did you even listen to what I said, Charles?
I did. But I agree with you about the Disney thing, but I think that the government needs to take a firm stand on the orc issue. Well, I think there's been a lack of government attention.
Well, that's definitely true when it came to the Hobbit movies. The government needed to get involved there and shut that down.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Straight away. I mean, they crammed one movie into 3. So I think Disney needs to be punished as well for what they did to poor Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time. I mean, that was terrible. And, I actually had someone say to me reproachfully when they read my review of it, "Oh, you don't like it because it was directed by a black woman." No, I don't like it because it wasn't any good.
Wow, those are the worst, because that's like, did you even read the article? Did you even read the book? Did you even see the movie? Do words mean anything to you?
No. Now you know. It's true. I mean, that really PO'd me. And of course, the thing when I saw that movie, Disney brought out they bought the production rights to A Wrinkle in Time, and Madeleine L'Engle was still alive. I knew her, but she was still alive when Disney's first effort came out. It was a TV movie, about 2005 or something like that, and it was. I saw it. I mean, the book was great. The TV movie was so-so. They asked Madeleine L'Engle what she thought of it, and her response was she expected it to be lousy, and it was. All right. So 2 years ago or a year ago, whenever it was, 2018, I guess, I see the Disney release of A Wrinkle in Time. It was awful. And I went back home. And mind you, it wasn't the acting. They tried the best they could. I don't blame the actors, but it was just bad. So I ran home and I watched the 2005 TV movie, which I remembered not thinking much of. And in comparison to what I had just seen, it was so much closer to the book. It just shows you,
Yeah.
So yeah, Disney definitely there needs to be an intervention for Disney. They've got problems. One of the great myths is that Uncle Walt's head was frozen cryogenically. I don't believe that, but I wish it were true, because we need Uncle Walt back.
I know.
I mean,
I was thinking about this past week, how, well, not, and more often than that too. We've touched on this before, because we've talked about Disney, we've talked about the Song of the South, and we've reminisced about what Disney used to be and what it is now. And I think after one of the shows we were talking about it with my mom, and she had a line that really struck a chord with me. I think it really hit the nail on the head, which is, she said, Disney, it, with the things like, what is it, Wonderful World of Disney? Show, she said, it really made it feel like life is worth living. That life is wonderful. Life is beautiful. And that's something that is so rare nowadays, to just have this, I don't want to say cheeseball, but to show beauty and niceness and kindness. Everything's so sharp-edged. All the conversation is so sharp-edged and
nasty.
Witty and nasty. And ooh, wow, I made some cheap joke point that, makes fun of you. Oh, ha ha ha.
Yeah, you're right. And the great thing about Disney was that it was never perfect, but it was, as you say, always affirmative.
It lifts, and the other way I like to say it is, it lifts people up, not drags you down.
Well, yeah, and there were happy endings, and it was wonderful. I mean, I remember there was a particular Wonderful World of Color was what the Wonderful World of Disney was called originally, and it was the first color programming that they had. Of course, we saw it in black and white because we didn't have a color TV, so it was like the Wonderful World of Black and White. But if you look now, you can see them on the internet, the original credits and openings to the Wonderful World of Color, and they're just eye-popping.
Yeah.
And for people who were used to black and white television, this was amazing. Well, their Wonderful World of Disney, Wonderful World of Color, there are all sorts of wonderful films, both live action and cartoons. And, Disney loved Walt Disney loved historic films. And even if they were a bit, shall we say, cheesy, they were good. I mean, they were pleasant, they were enjoyable. And I honestly, for me, it's a piece of a piece with everything from Norman Rockwell to the Boy Scouts to the American Legion. It was the world I was born into. And it had its defects, God knows. And the proof of the pudding is that we are where we are now. That didn't happen by magic. But it was better. It's like when you're in the tertiary stage of a disease, you've got chunks falling out of your face. The primary phase was so much better when you just had these vague headaches, But I mean, I'm sorry to say that I prefer Disneyland now to Disney movies. First run Disney movies. There was one I saw that I really did like, and it was the sequel to Mary Poppins. I thought they did a very good job in carrying the spirit over.
Okay.
And it had Dick Van Dyke.
Well, there you go. Yeah, Dick Van Dyke's good. The other thing, since we're talking about sort of before and after, and what used to be and what is no longer, you know what I noticed? Another thing that is actually kind of not allowed is nostalgia.
Yeah.
You can't have nostalgia for the past because the past was horrible. We didn't have all these new rights for all these sorts of people and all these weird things. And so it was horrible back then. So how can you be nostalgic for a racist, sexist, blah, 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 period?
Well, and the proof of the pudding, and this shows you where reality and ideology can slap each other around. When Mad Men came out initially, it was designed to show how terrible that era was.
Yeah.
But it had a very different effect.
It
made people yearn for it.
It did. And one of the attacks of it is how everybody is very hypocritical about things. Perhaps Don Draper has good manners, but he's a womanizer. He has good manners to women in terms of take your hat off in front of women, stand up when they leave the table, blah, blah, blah.
Which is what one did.
And it's kind of thrown in, it's like, oh, well, he's a hypocrite. Look at him. But as you say, the difference between then and now is people back then knew the ideal. And they didn't live the ideal, but at least it was there.
It was there. Now, Don Draper, a woman came into the room, he'd sit there and say, "Sit your rear down, slut." That's the way it would be today. And, hypocrisy is only possible when you have standards. If you have no standards, you can't be a hypocrite. I mean, you could sit there like a pig at the trough, all right, that's fine. And you will never find a pig who's a hypocrite. They are hypocrisy free. And the more like pigs we become, the more free of hypocrisy we become. I don't know that this is a game. I really don't. I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't judge, as you know. But, we're oinking and rolling in the mud and all this kind of thing. And we're not hypocritical. We may be a lot of other things. We might be, pigs rolling in the muck, but at least we're not hypocritical. We have no standards. We have no ideals, so it's good.
Oh, gosh. I'm sorry, but just the imagery of everybody being a pig, it just...
Yeah,
And that's,
roll around.
yeah.
And then they look at Don Draper and say, what a hypocrite. Out of my way, I'm at the trough. So, let's look at another meme.
Oh, another meme. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this was submitted by Clerical. Okay, yeah, the new children's book. Alexander and the Day That Blended Into Every Other Day, like some Kafkaesque nightmare with no merciful end in sight.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a little dark for a children's book.
No, it's the new normal. I think it's beautiful.
It's just to read that as a bedtime story to your child.
Yeah, and I
can imagine over here.
I can imagine the child. Mommy, can you finish the book now, please? Oh no, dear. There's yet another chapter. But you said that last night. Yes, and it was true then, and it's true now. And the little kid couldn't go to school, so no, Mom, please. Yes, it's wonderful. I think that's the winner of this week. The other one was good, but this one,
that was, yeah.
It pretty much sums up the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to run out right now if you have children. Buy this book and read it to them continuously. God. Don't ever stop.
Okay, well, that'll do it for the memes today. Some fun memes. Let's go on to the questions. First one is from Daniel. Hello, Vincent and Charles. I would love to know Mr. Coulombe's opinion on the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. There are many differing opinions on Yugoslavia as a whole. Of course, it arose following the collapse of Austria-Hungary, so something great had to die for it to come into being, which I think colors a lot of people's disposition towards the country. Some say it was one of the greatest losses of the 20th century. On the other hand, many people say that Yugoslavia was doomed to fail from the start because of its ethnic and religious divisions. So on its own, is the Kingdom of Yugoslavia something that should be looked at fondly? Was it something that could have worked long-term without the looming threat of possible invasion that brought them together in the first place? Or was the motto, one people, one king, one state, a pipe dream all along?
Well, I would say it was probably something of a pipe dream all along. I mean, the Croats and Slovenes on the one hand, and the Bosniaks, and the Serbs on the other, I mean, their languages are similar. The Slovenes less so, but the Croats and the Serbs, their language is very similar. But their cultures are quite different. Their religion, of course, is different. And they just had centuries of very different experience behind them that made them very different peoples. Serbia is a country I feel particularly sad for because you figure they started the 20th century as this little country that was just south of the Danube. And it was a small place. Then, during the First and Second Balkan Wars, they were able to conquer what's now Kosovo and all the way down to and including Macedonia. And that was Serbia in 1914. Well, after World War I, they annexed Montenegro, and then they go into this sort of shotgun wedding with the Croats and Slovenes and so on. But from the very beginning, on the one hand, the Serbs were dominant, and on the other, the Croats and the Slovenes and so forth came very quickly to resent them. So I think the breakup of Austria-Hungary was a mistake, and I think that the incorporation of Croatia and Slovenia and Bosnia and Yugoslavia was probably a mistake as well. What's interesting, though, interesting story from the end of the empire, there were a group of Serbs from Croatia, imperial Serbs, if you will, who were fighting a royal Serb unit, and it was literally at the end. Everything was falling apart. So the royal Serbs said to their imperial counterparts, everything's falling apart with you guys, surrender. And the response was, you of all people should know we Serbs never surrender.
Okay.
That was an interesting take. But now, having said that, I have a lot of regard for the last king of Yugoslavia, the last of the two, the three, I guess, Peter I, Alexander, and Peter II. Peter II was a nice fellow who was, in a horrible position. And he, incidentally, he was of the opinion that the annexation of Croatia, etc., was a mistake. And that if they wanted to go their own way, they should have been allowed to. Peter, a very sad fellow, died in the United States, in Colorado, and he had his funeral, the only royal funeral on American soil outside Hawaii, at the little Serbian church in Arcadia, not too far from your place on Baldwin.
Yeah.
So I always think of poor King Peter, and I say a prayer for him whenever I drove past it. Interesting fellow. The other thing, too, is I'm going to say about Serbia was that all that bloodshed in the two wars for the establishment of Yugoslavia as a sort of Greater Serbia, and then they lost it all. And now, except for the Vojvodina, which was really part of Hungary, the Banat, north of the Danube, they're almost down to what they were in 1900. And you find yourself asking, what was all that about? What was that for? It's not like even the Serbs really benefited from it. They were on this wild adventure that led them into horror and bloodshed. And of course, World War II was particularly bad for them. So yeah, I'm very sad for the Serbs. I really am. Even that war, World War One, the Archduke was murdered by a fellow who was working unknowingly for the Serbian Secret Service. The mastermind behind the plot, his code name was Apis, I forget his real name, but he ended up being executed by the Serbian government itself 2 years into the war for other reasons. But you find yourself saying, why?
Yeah. Was the motto "One People, One King, One State" a pipe dream all along?
I think so. I mean, there was no way you were going to get one people out of them. King Alexander tried, and it didn't work. And see, the thing was that the Croats and all that had been subjected by the Hungarians to Magyarization, and it didn't work. There was no way it was going to work with the Serbs.
Okay, so for someone so I'm not familiar with the differences of this area. How are their differences more difficult to reconcile than the Italian states, the different states in Italy?
Well, the different states in Italy have the same language and the same religion. There was an awful lot of bitterness over their forced unification, as evidenced by the fact that millions of Italians, including your own people, left the country after the Risorgimento, which before, immigration out of Italy was minimal. But as soon as the country was united, you had millions of Italians move to America and Argentina and Canada and Australia and all the settler
Wasn't that
countries.
over other things, though?
It started, those other things were introduced by the new Sardinian government. Conscription, which the old governments hadn't had. Heavy taxation, which the old governments hadn't had. One reason, the reason why Sardinia was able to knock them over like so many bowling pins was that Count Cavour, from about 1840 on, did two things. One, he militarized Sardinia. He raised the biggest standing army on the peninsula, and he upped the taxes like nobody's business. on the Sardinian people. So by the time, in 1859, by the time he was ready to go to war, he had both a lot of dough to do it with and a lot of troops to fight with. Well, when the Italian states were finally conquered, they established a centralized government which taxed and conscripted the way the Sardinians had been taxed and conscripted. But a lot of southern and other Italians wouldn't stand still for it. So off they went. But that was a result of the Risorgimento.
But the northern Italians didn't seem to mind.
Well, no, that's because they were running the show. The Italians are a funny bunch. You won't know this being one, but they are a funny bunch in the sense that, due to their geography and so forth, they've always been a very disunited people since the fall of the Roman Empire. And even the states that we know of in the 19th century were themselves agglomerations of city-states, one of which conquered the others. Florence to establish Tuscany, Modena, Parma, etc. But they were very, very regional-oriented, very localist-oriented, and so uniting them was very difficult. But they all had the same language. They all had the same religion.
When you say religion, so what religions were divisive in Yugoslavia? It's just the Orthodox, the different Orthodox?
No. The Croats and Slovenes are Catholic. The Bosniaks are Muslim, and the Serbs and Macedonians are Orthodox.
Well, doesn't Russia handle that? I mean, Russia, because I remember on a Putin interview, he was actually proud of that. He felt that the different factions, the different ethnicities and religions that you just mentioned, Muslim, Orthodox, and Catholic, there's no problem because there's such a long history. Is he telling a tale here?
He's not exactly telling a tale, but you've got to bear in mind also that Catholics and Muslims are a small minority in Russia. It would be very different if they were half and half. And the other thing too is that the Croats and the Slovenes who favored incorporation to Yugoslavia did so under the idea and the assurance that their languages and so forth would have equal status with Serb, and that they would have autonomy. Now, that's not what happened. Even the name Yugoslavia is a reflection of that, because when it was first proclaimed, it was the kingdom of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. And 4 years later, it was renamed Yugoslavia.
Okay.
You are not going to make one people out of those guys. But an interesting thing I find about Serbs and Croats, they dislike each other intensely. But in the diaspora, in the United States, Australia, Canada, and so forth, if you find Serbs, you'll find Croats. Now, why would they do that? Why would they go to Melbourne or San Pedro, California, just to be close, when they dislike one another so much? That doesn't make sense.
Do they have the same food?
Similar.
I don't know.
Oh, well, but I wish them all well. I wish everybody well. Everybody should be happy. I'm all in favor of goodness.
That's what we like to hear. Next two questions are from Aaron. Dear Mr. Coulombe, in a bow of the head to the senior suit.
That's you.
I have a question about criticisms about Abraham Lincoln. Due to my instinctive high-Toryism, I am a sympathizer with the Confederate cause, but I find some of the criticisms of Abraham Lincoln's wartime acts questionable. In particular, the claims of tyranny are made against such as Lincoln for such actions as suspending habeas corpus and shutting down newspapers. Yet these actions are the norm for governments in wartime in free societies, both before the Civil War and afterwards. Also, compared with some of the actions of his predecessors. John Adams with the Sedition and Aliens Act, Andrew Jackson and the forced Indian removals, his successors, Woodrow Wilson with the Espionage Act, FDR with the Japanese internment, or John Marshall magicking the power of judicial review for the Supreme Court out of nowhere. Lincoln's actions seem sensible and measured, while the criticism seems ahistorical. Interesting.
It's very interesting, and I would say he's got a certain amount of truth to it. Also, the fact that people do not sufficiently point out how terrible the things he mentions were is unfortunate. The thing with Lincoln, I mean, the tyranny aside, there are several questions that, of course, have to be asked. One is, was military action to compel the southern states to remain in the Union correct? Was that the right thing to do? You'd have to accept that first before you could go on to critiquing his specific actions. James McMasters, who was the publisher of the Freeman in New York, attacked Lincoln as an enemy of freedom of the press, and then Lincoln shut down his paper and threw him in jail. Which,
I love that.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate concatenation of circumstances.
Well, to me, it's like, well, I guess I can't win with you, sir. Okay, I'll be the villain. I'll be who you want me to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so he did, So that was interesting. But having said all that, and bearing in mind that Lincoln felt that maintaining the unity of the Union was a sacred cause and worth anything, within those limits, as it were, other than imposing an income tax, which we had never had before, and I don't think anybody is really all that happy for, except the Internal Revenue, and those of us who got our $1,200 stimulus checks, because that money had to come out of somebody. Other than that, I certainly see his point, but I'd say something else, and that is that regardless of what else one says about Mr. Lincoln, I do believe that his murder was the second worst thing to happen to the South after being defeated. Because had he lived, I do not believe there would have been Reconstruction. And if there had been no Reconstruction, there would not have been Jim Crow.
Okay. So, Charles, come on. So, Abraham Lincoln, angel from heaven or demon from hell?
Why do I suddenly feel like I'm trapped on Twitter, the play?
I'm representing the people, okay? And the people
the right
know
people.
That you're sitting on the fence. And we want to know if this person is totally good or totally bad.
He's totally both. Kind of like everybody else. No, Lincoln is an interesting figure. Not nearly as malevolent as he might have been. But again,
what does that mean?
What's that?
What does that mean?
It means he could have been a lot worse.
I don't understand that statement.
He had a lot of power, emergency power, arrogated to the presidency for the war. He could have been a lot worse. He could have been one of these Reconstructionists, who just wanted to blaze the South off the face of the earth.
Oh, okay. I
But
thought you were implying that there's some sort of quality or some sort of deficiency in Lincoln that could have played itself out in...
No, what I'm saying is he could have been a lot worse than he was.
Well, that's true for any politician.
Some are quite as bad as they're going to get. Okay. Some really are just human garbage waiting to be moved off to the dump of eternity.
The
I mean
dump
that
of
in a nice way.
eternity.
Yeah, I mean that in a nice way.
Okay. All right. Fair enough, Charles.
All right.
Uh, Next question from Aaron. I have a question for Mr. Charles about California's role in the run-up to and during the American Civil War. I read that there was significant support for the South in the state, especially in Southern California. I believe there was an attempt to split Southern California off as a separate state in the late 1850s during the Civil War there. And during the Civil War, there were active groups of Confederate partisans fighting in the area. So, what is California's role?
Well, the first movies were made in California in 1859. No?
No,
So that part isn't true.
no. That's yeah.
All right. Then we'll forget that part. 19th century cinema in Los Angeles. All right, we'll forget it. Some people have vision, Obviously, it's not appreciated right now. Never mind. But there was a move during the war to have California, Oregon, and Washington split off as the Republic of the Pacific. There were a lot of Southern sympathizers in Southern California. In fact, every time there was a Southern victory in the war, a Confederate flag would be flown from the steeple of the City Hall in the fabulous town of El Monte.
Nice.
Yeah. The French in L.A. were for some reason considered to be particularly pro-Southern, and so their two militia companies were dissolved by the governor at the beginning of the war. So it was as you might imagine from just from geography alone, a lot of Southerners settled in Southern California. Northern California, especially because of the gold rush and things like that, had attracted a much more cosmopolitan population. But Southern California was still kind of sleepy. Little old Pueblo. It was, the big thing was chasing Vasquez and the bandit, Vasquez Rocks.
No, wait, what?
Vasquez Rocks. It's a rock formation. They've done a lot of movies. Look it up after the show.
Oh, okay.
You'll recognize it from a ton of movies.
Okay, so
when I was a Boy Scout, we'd go camping out there.
Okay. I think I probably know what you're talking about, like from The Searchers and probably old movies like that. Okay. Okay. Two questions from Brian. Why do the Synoptic Gospels tell so many of the same stories? What are the special characteristics of each?
Well, they tell so many of the same stories because they were written relatively early and around the same time. The Gospel of St. John, the non-synoptic Gospel, St. John wrote when he was quite old and had had a long time to reflect upon the meaning of what had happened. But the Synoptic Gospels do have several differences. Mark, the Gospel of Mark, is interesting. They say it was originally the only one of them written in Latin. But Mark was a disciple of Peter. And so you get a bit of Peter's input in the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of St. Luke, apparently Our Lady herself had a certain amount of influence on.
Right, that's what they say.
Yeah. So, that's quite interesting. Matthew, of course, has a lot of detail. St. Matthew being a tax collector, I'm sure he was, keen on recording things. But, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lay on.
Yeah. All sounds pretty good other than I think that the Sacred Heart Fathers from my high school would disagree with you on the Gospel of John, that the Gospel of John actually wasn't written by John.
You know what? You know what?
What?
They can take a hike.
That's not a refutation. That's not an argument.
Read Haydock and get back to me.
Read Haydock.
The Haydock Bible.
Yeah, I know. What in the commentary is going to be...
It talks about John in great detail. For that matter, read Murray Thompson.
Hey, you've been recommending him a lot. What was it? The History of the Catholic Church? What did he write? Yeah.
The History of the Catholic Church in 8 volumes.
Yeah.
Murray was the writer. He's French. Thompson was the translator, so it's called Murray Thompson. No, I mean, I understand that for a lot of clerics with weak faith, defanging the scriptures are very important. I understand that. And it's very necessary because unless you can do that, it's difficult to get out of the notion that the sacraments in the church are absolutely necessary. And that's a terrible thing.
Okay. Next question from Brian. Seems to me that most traditionalists, at least in the United States, are not monarchists. While they accept the Catholic confessional state, they seem to hold on to republicanism due to misplaced patriotic motives. Is the situation much better in countries that have monarchies or have had them in the past?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in France and Austria, all throughout Central Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, there are a lot of monarchists among the devout trads, without a question. One of the funny things, years ago, I read a article in the Atlantic about the SSPX when they were first getting started in America, and it was called "More Catholic Than the Pope: A Romance of the One True Church." And this woman went out to see them at their then headquarters in Oyster Bay, and she soon realized that the SSPX at that time, at that place, was sort of an interesting coalition between John Birch-type American Republicans and French Royalists. And she found that it was kind of an uneasy mix. Well, that was true. And it is certainly true that in our country, a lot of trads are, for want of a better word, Americanists. I think they cite St. Robert Bellarmine, not the part where St. Robert Bellarmine says monarchy is the best form of government, but the part where he says that government authority comes to the people and they can change the type of government if they want.
Mediatrix Press, shout out to them. They have the book on the Roman Pontiff.
Yeah, that's
Ryan
the one.
Grant is the publisher, and I think they turned it into an article, and it so clearly says monarchy.
Well, see, that's the part. That's the book they forget.
Isn't that funny how we forget all these quotes from St. Thomas that we forget? What is it? De Regno.
Well, see, you got to remember that St. Thomas wasn't writing about the United States. Neither was St. Robert Bellarmine. See, you got to understand that in 1776, the Holy Ghost descended and enveloped the founding fathers in Philadelphia. And then he would make a return trip in 1788. And between those two trips, the divine nature, the divine order of our country was established, which is why we already have a Catholic Republic. It's just a matter of accepting it.
What?
What do you mean, what? We already have a Catholic Republic. It's just a question of recognizing and accepting it for what it is. The founding fathers were all basically Catholic. What?
I don't even know what to say to you right now.
Not only that, but John Carroll was the most Catholic bishop in the world at his time. And you know what else? The American settlement of church and state is far superior than any other that has ever been.
Charles, I'm gonna go ahead and need you. I just need you to stop because I can't afford all the aspirin that I'm going to need from the headache you're giving me.
No, do you hear how you are? Do you hear how you are? You're dismissive of something devoutly believed by a lot of people. And to add insult to injury, there is that wonderful statue that I put up on Facebook this past week of Christ flanked by Lincoln and Washington. Now, granted, that's at the shrine at Nisida, which was condemned by the church, but it is an idea of how a lot of people of this sort really think. Look at the great argument that's going on right now on Twitter between the integrists and the, I don't know what you would call them, libertarians / well, you saw that article I posted, didn't you, for the professor from Clemson, Dr. Thompson?
No.
It was attacking the far right, the alt-right, and so forth, as being anti-American. And it was almost hysterical. The poor man was very, very upset. And he was talking about my friend Sohrab, and he was talking about Adrian Vermeule at Harvard, Patrick Deneen, people like that, the integrists. And there's a lot of people very upset with them
the problem with that, and I can tell he didn't do this because it sounds stupid, is if you're in order to say that one's anti-American, the very first step in your article should be to define what it means to be an American.
Yeah.
And I bet he didn't do that.
No.
So then then the rest is just noise.
Well, what he did was he said, basically, if you attack the founding fathers, you're anti-American. And he was very upset with this fellow called, unfortunate name, Mencius Moldbug, for rejecting the revolution. But all joking aside, and I do that occasionally, I think we do have here, the one thing is, when I read the article, the guy's a year older than I am. And I felt his pain. He's upset that everything he was brought up with is being rejected. But it's what we were saying earlier. It's Disney. It's Norman Rockwell. It's being rejected because, in large part, it wasn't really real. And the argument I made in Star Spangled Crown, I've made it in a ton of articles, and I'll make it till I die, is that we have got to begin to construct a patriotism based upon the country itself and not upon the ideology that has characterized it. The country is real.
Would you also say the government, too, the structure of the government? You seem to say that America's more than the people in the government, too.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. It's more than the form of government.
Yeah, it's more than the form of government.
America is its history. America is its peoples.
And I think that's important. Conversely, for perhaps hardcore monarchists who, seem to get the wrong message that I hate the United States because it's this government. That's wrong. Don't go there.
No, I mean, what you end up doing is you have two mirror image fallacies.
Yeah.
The one is that they're both based on the same premise, which is that the United States are no more than their government.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong. The United States are a lot more than their government. The United States are a nation which has existed in various forms, really beginning in 1565 when the Spanish came to St. Augustine. 1607, the English came to Jamestown. 1608, the French came to Quebec. And that was the beginning of our country. And it's gone through all sorts of permutations and produced what we have now. But what is it that we have now? Leave the government aside for a moment and look at everything else. Look at its incredible cornucopia of peoples. Its incredible scenery from one end of the country to the other. And its history, is not just black. We've had a lot of very brave men who fought in wars that perhaps were not just, but that doesn't take away from their bravery.
Mm.
It doesn't take away from their idealism such as it was. As I've said before, the United States gave the world both the cocktail and the polio vaccine. It's the country our fathers came to, and with all its weird mixed history, it's ours. Now, I think we really need to jettison this false notion that the country is nothing more than its political ideology and its government.
Mm.
It's a lot more than that. Like any other country. You think France is just the Fifth Republic? It's not. It's a lot more than that. You think Britain is just the Prime Minister? No. So that's that. Monarchists, American monarchists anyway, have got to love their country the way all foreign monarchists love theirs. Not because of the government, but in spite of it.
Mm.
And similarly, American Republicans have to disabuse themselves of the notion that America's wonderfulness comes from her government or her ideology. It doesn't come from that. It comes from the fact that men and women have lived and died here and created the home we have. That's what it comes from. I made the point somewhere or other that on Independence Day, the important thing is not the Independence Day per se. It's Independence Day as it's celebrated in Lawrence, Kansas, or Los Angeles, or New York, or Indiana. In other words, it's the ritual itself which pulls people together. I mean, you remember in Star Spangled Crown, I had a lot of fun tying up the broken pieces of America's past. It was really a lot of fun to do. I enjoyed it, no end. Because we forget that America was erected on monarchical foundations. Our laws, our institutions, all of them were monarchical before the founding fathers repurposed them. So the fun thing about writing Star Spangled Crown was that in a lot of cases I simply had my fictional monarch return things to the way they had been. And it wasn't hard. I mean, in real life it would be, of course, but the concept would not be hard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Americans in general, Catholic Americans in particular, feel very, very threatened in a way by the notion that our government isn't perfect. And the reason, I think, is because they have not learned to love the country, but to love the government and to love the ideology. And I have actually heard people say things like, well, if America doesn't live up to its own ideals, it's worthless. I hate that. I hate hearing that. You don't risk your life for a country because of its ideology. You risk it for itself. You risk it because, mom and apple pie.
That's a weird statement. I've never heard that before.
What's that?
What you just said, that if the country doesn't uphold its ideals, it's worthless.
Yeah, I hate that. I really hate that. And the problem that you have with even questioning those ideals is that for a lot of people, that's actually loving those is actually what their love of country is based on. And if those ideals, as they understand them, should be incorrect, well, there goes their love of country. It's a little bit as when you're arguing with someone whose religion is kind of on shaky grounds. Who get very upset at you. Same.
Yeah. All right. Last question for today is from Jody.
Oh, Jody. All right.
Top floor executive Jody. Recently, he upgraded big time. Mailroom clerk.
Oh,
top floor
Jody,
executive.
I'm here for you, pal.
Hope you love your new office, Jody, and the lobster lunches.
Indeed.
Okay. He says, I've been on a journey trying to figure out what kind of monarchist I am. While I prefer the Carlism, and in some cases phalangism, of the Spanish, it seems to be an ideology exclusive to Spain. What are some American alternatives to the ideology?
Well, firstly, of course, there's no need to have only one kind of monarchist. Number two, I know what he means by this. This was another thing I tried to address in Star Spangled Crown. Not that I'm making a plug or anything. But void were prohibited.
Limited time offer.
No
While supplies
CODs.
last. No CODs.
Operators are standing by.
Act now.
Indeed. Star Spangled Crown is a book, Vinny?
Yes, Charles. And if you buy that with, I don't know, let's say Puritan's Empire, Vicars of Christ, or The End of Democracy, get free shipping on your order.
Free shipping and handling?
Oh, yeah. On all orders over $25, free shipping and handling. Only at TumblerHouse.com.
Wow, that's a steal.
Anyway.
Anyway, so the thing is, after many years of studying Catholic monarchisms, because as Jody rightly points out, the Spanish have Carlism, the French have French legitimism. They're very national, but I have delineated 4 things they have in common.
You wrote an article on this, I think.
I did.
Yeah.
The altar, the throne, subsidiarity, and solidarity. Those 4. Plus a kind of half point of the idea of Christendom, the Res Publica Christiana, etc. Now,
that was for your article that for Tumblr House that you just wrote.
Yes.
Right? What type of monarchist
right.
are you? Yeah.
Well, having said that, looking at America, there are several possibilities. Of course, I cooked up one in Star Spangled Crown, and that's the idea of a truly American monarchy that attempts to weave together all the different strange monarchical threads that wind through our history and culture and produce a truly American monarchy. But there are other possibilities. I mean, there are people who believe that we should simply become part of the Commonwealth and replace the president with a governor general. There are people who believe in breaking the country up into regional monarchies because they feel that the United States, as they are currently constituted, are simply too big to be a coherent or sane nation. Myself, of course, my personal preference is exactly what I wrote in Star Spangled Crown. I wrote the book, so I got to invent the monarchy I liked. So there. But you should feel free to explore these issues. One of the things that my mythical king did was, in a sense, constitute himself the successor of all the different monarchs who have ruled different parts of our country.
Yeah.
So when he came out to Los Angeles, he spoke about being the successor of Carlos III, the founder of the city.
Of course.
when he was, back east, of course, he laid great stress on being the Stuart successor of the British kings. And he even decided that because the Philippines and Liberia are kind of screwed up due to the role we played in their history, it was up to the United States to set them right since we had screwed them up. Now, whether or not anybody would really do that in real life, I don't know. But it was a fun way to provide a source of conflict that was not directly applicable to modern problems.
Is it fair to say that just as there are many different types of republicanism, that there can be many different types of monarchists?
Of course, and partly for national reasons, but also for philosophical ones. I mean, there are certainly. I mean, I made the statement years ago that, in my experience, there are 5 kinds of serious American monarchists. Now, I'm not talking about people who are chasing phony titles or orders or that kind of thing, or just crazy people.
Yeah.
But the first, I would say, are what I call philosophical monarchists,
Yeah.
who, without any attachment to a particular dynasty or anything like that, just believe that monarchy is the best form of government. There are religious monarchists, and these are folk who are in favor of monarchy because they feel it's the most compatible with their faith.
Well,
And they can be they can be Catholic, they can be Orthodox, they can be Anglican, Hindu, Muslim, etc. There are emigres and their descendants, who carry a certain loyalty to the house of the nation from whence they came. White Russians and French emigres and people like that. And then yes, you see in your part, you've got three very different possibilities of loyalty that way.
What, the Bourbons and...
The Bourbons, the Savoys, and the Habsburgs.
Yeah.
So those are 3 you could play with.
There you go.
And then there are the Anglophiles. And these are the folk that range all the way from people who deeply believe that the British system is best to folk who simply love their Queen Mother plates.
Yeah.
And they do love Downton Abbey. Now, those are the 4 main types. The 5th is the combination thereof.
Yeah.
Because obviously, it's possible for someone to be all 4 at once.
But I still think, are you a monarchist or are you not a monarchist? I don't know if it's black and white like that. I would say it's not black and white like that, because there are different answers to various important questions. For example, to me, one of the basic questions, or one of the basic answers that gets you down this line of thinking is, was the revolution against kings a bad thing? See, because that's kind of the first step against sort of Americanist programming. All kings bad, all kings tyrant, all kings are evil. It's Game of Thrones. Everything's just for power. And they abuse the power all the time. They're tyrannical. So that's kind of the first step, is looking beyond your programming there and seeing things like, whoa, was this revolution against this king a good thing? One of sort of the most profound memes I've seen, I don't know if it was a meme because it had a serious point. It was where there was a picture of some depraved celebrity, whether they're risque or whatever. It's just some really depraved celebrity, but also a very popular one that everyone recognizes. And the caption is simply, We killed kings for this.
It's a pretty bitter reflection.
It makes you think.
Well, it does, and of course, I have to admit, um, when I hear people arguing the kings were tyrannical and we're all sitting here under lockdown, uh, you know, and again, putting aside the issue of whether or not it's medically warranted, we have abdicated our rights to the state in a way that we haven't done before. That's just the nature of the thing. Now, it might be warranted, it might not be, but the point I'm making is it's a bit much for people to be yapping about freedom versus tyranny when they're locked down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just silly. And I also, that aside, I mean, I made this argument before, even someone like Henry VIII had to pretend to go according to the law. He couldn't alter the nature of marriage. He couldn't alter the nature of what was or was not a human being. This is something our Supreme Courts around the globe have arrogated to themselves, except Ireland, where the people arrogated to themselves the right to murder children. Now, that is an absolute power that no Christian monarch, anyway, no monarch who called himself a Christian, would ever have dreamed of trying to do. And yet we accept it.
Yeah.
We rolled over and barked like dogs because our masters told us to. And you see, I'm old enough, I remember when abortion came to America. And there was nothing to be done because the Supreme Court had said so. So that was it. The great Supreme Court, from which there is no appeal. Our masters. So, and again, a few years ago, in London versus Reno, the Supreme Court completely altered the nature of the relationship of the citizen to the state. When, as you recall, they allowed cities to seize any property they could get higher taxes for from somebody else. Well, see, what that meant was that you were no longer a free citizen eligible to own land, but a mere trustee for your government of your property, until and unless they should find someone who can pay them more for it. So what does this do to the whole argument, republic versus monarchy? Well, first, what's a republic? Ours is, one of the things that really drives me crazy is when people quote Samuel 8 to me about our Lord not wanting the Jews to have a king.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, my immediate thought is, you're right, and we are ruled by judges. That's worked out so well for us, hasn't it? Being ruled by judges. Yeah. Seek bloody Heil, baby.
Well, Solon Shirts is, I have to say that the person who got me into the monarchist mindset, it's actually Solon Shirts. Because she is vicious. I mean, Charles has helped and added to it in a tremendous way, but like Solange Hertz, just like Charles is kind of subtle, and Solange Hertz is just vicious.
Oh, she could be brutal.
It's just like, you like this? You like this? This is democracy. You know what democracy in action is to Solange Hertz? That's we want Barabbas.
Yeah.
And she says, make no mistake, democracy in action results in deicide. Or, what's the killing? Regicide.
Regicide. Well, it's very true. I mean, I certainly can't deny it. Of course, you remember Bill Biersack and I came up with what we held to be the first example of democracy?
It's Adam and Eve. I remember
Adam and Eve
that from
and the
your
serpent.
Talks. That was very persuasive, too. I mean...
Adam and Eve and the serpent outvoted God.
Yeah.
So, with wonderful results we've been enjoying ever since.
But there's so much I'd like to touch on because I feel like there's a lot of important things. So while Solange has all these really good points in terms of getting people into monarchy, one of the things that's essential that I learned from you in the past 2 years is the relationship between the altar, the throne, and hearth that you've talked about recently, and I feel that's so powerful and important. And I just like to explain why I feel that's important. It's
Sure.
Because I think perhaps a lot of people think that monarchy might be just something on the side, and it's like, well, okay, I don't need to be that, you know. But with your model, altar, hearth, and throne, it shows that monarchy is actually right smack in the middle of everything. As you kind of point, I don't know if you directly said this or if I extrapolated this, but first you had the revolution against the altar, against the Pope with the Protestant Revolution. That had to happen in order to allow, in order for it to be possible for the revolution against the throne,
Right.
the revolution against kings. The revolution against kings was not possible without that. And then finally, the revolution against the hearth, the family, fatherhood. That would not be possible if not for the first two revolutions. And so you have the revolution against monarchy right smack in the middle of everything, of the revolution against all that is good. And so,
well, and the thing is too, I like to say that there are three very basic male roles: king, priest, and father. And these three roles, each of the three roles partakes of the other two. The king is the father of his people, and he's a priest in a sense. They considered him in the Middle Ages a mixed person. That's what the coronation was all about and all that. He was the chief layman.
Yeah.
And his observance of the church year is, in some places, considered to have miraculous powers of healing and so forth. All that is the priestly aspect of the king's office. The priest is a father, of course, to his people. He's a king. He takes some of the kingly aspect because of his rule over his parish and so on, and over his flock. And then the father partakes of priest and king as well, because he is or ought to be the king in his household and the leader of its religious observances. He blesses his children and all that kind of thing, leads everyone in grace, and sets the religious tone of the house. Similarly, the king himself had three roles, which are sort of interconnected: judge, warlord, and in a certain sense, priest. Because he at the very center of his authority was the right to do justice. But he also had to defend his people. And he also, again, in the manner I mentioned as sort of chief layman, he also had a large influence on the religious life of his subjects. Now, what happens when you first have the Protestant revolt? Well, several things. The authority of the priesthood is either done away with or diminished, and the other two roles suffer as a result, both the king and the father. Then you have the Second Revolution. What happens? Well, kingship is destroyed to follow the priesthood, and then fatherhood is damaged. And because of that, we had the Third Revolution. Now we've gone one step more. We're in a fourth revolution, which is against reality itself. And that revolution, we cannot win. Because, as I've said on this very show years ago, you pick a fight with reality, reality will always win. Reality will beat you. It has to, it's very, very basic. It doesn't have great strategies, but you're going to grind your face into the wall. You know, I love that cartoon of the woman stepping out from a skyscraper window, and you see her thought balloon. Gravity is a social construct. Well, I don't think she thought quite the same thing when her rear hit the ground.
So, I don't know if I want to belabor some of these points about monarchy. I guess perhaps the last thing I'd like to say in terms of the thing is, I don't like the tribalism aspect of monarchism. Like traditionalist monarchists. Oh, I'm a monarchist, therefore I have to be all hardcore. You know, I feel like there's a lot of people with monarchist sympathies, and that's fine to me.
Well, one thing you've got to bear in mind is that people of any despised minority position tend to get kind of nasty because they're used to people being nasty.
It's true.
I mean, I've had all sorts of terrible things said to me by virtue of my monarchism. And my response is very simple. Why am I such a threat to you? You know my views are ridiculous. You know that I'm at best, I'm a sort of LARPer. Why are you so upset? I don't understand you. And then, of course, you get some hemming and hawing, and, well, you seem very angry. Why are you such an angry person? Your views dominate. You're running the show. Why are you so upset? I don't understand. Well, what you're saying is hardly ever likely to happen here. You have what you want. You've got just what you want. You've got nothing to be upset about. You're being sarcastic. You're making fun of me. Oh, I apologize if I've been sarcastic. I simply point out you have what you want. I certainly don't. You've won.
That is some savage knife twisting, Charles.
No.
That is just like,
What do you, what, to point out to someone that we've got what he wants? How's that wrong? You try to help people see that they've accomplished their own vision. And do they appreciate it? Not this much. But my late father, he knew. I'll never forget it. He used to say, always give the people what they want, good and hard.
That's our curse, isn't it? Gosh, we're going to get what we want.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Careful what you pray for. You've heard that phrase.
I have not heard that derivation of that phrase.
You've never heard that phrase?
Careful what you pray for?
Yeah.
I don't know.
God may grant your prayer, then you'll be sorry.
I mean, I don't see a lot of downside to winning the lottery.
Oh, you would. You would. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I had a friend who was the father of a very famous actor. Now, you might think that this was a great deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not really, because one time he brought his son by my place. We were going to go get breakfast, right? But he brings his son by. We couldn't go anywhere.
What? Wait, what?
We couldn't go anywhere because the son was a famous actor. So I had planned we were going to go for coffee at a local shop. We couldn't do that because if we had, the guy would have been mobbed.
Okay. Oh, what a shame. Gosh, life is rough.
Well, it was rough.
Oh,
Now,
man.
the funny thing about this, though, is that on that occasion, the said actor sat in a chair in my house. Sometime later, my late lamented friend, Matt Hale, who was one of my best friends at Nemi, died a couple of years ago. But at the time of our story, he had a girlfriend named Julie. And they came by my place, and I mentioned that this person had been there earlier, and she said, you've met so and so. That's amazing. I've always wanted to meet him." And I'm looking at Matt, looking at me, and he's not happy. She's going on and on about this guy. So finally, she says, "What's he like? What's he like?" And I looked at her, and I looked at Matt, and I said, "He's like Matt in every single particular." And then she says, "Oh, come on." I said, "Well, he is a lot taller. Matt is a lot taller. That's true." And she says, "Oh, Charles, you are a wonderful friend. A horrible liar, but a wonderful friend." But no, so I mention this because very often, you talk about winning the lottery, wouldn't it be great? Well, in some ways. But see, it's like being rich in general. If you're very wealthy, you don't know who's really interested in you for yourself and who just wants some dough.
I'll take both.
Well, the thing is, I've known people with that particular issue.
Let's get me some sycophants.
You already got it.
Let me tell
you got
some
a ton
jokes.
of them already. The Tumbler House Tower oozes sycophants for you.
I love it. Yeah. So why you bad-mouthing sycophants?
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's what is it? It's so fancy, it's sycophancy. Well, that's up there with you heard about the musical about our Muslim women?
No.
Sophisticated ladies.
Whatever.
Sufis, sophisticated.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's not going to get your bow of approval, is it?
No.
You're getting difficult to please in your old age. You know this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay,
it was better when you were little. I remember you'd laugh at almost anything. That was so much easier.
Well, I've wisened up, Charles. I always remember when you with your little jokes to put me down, and I've grown up now, and things have changed.
Well, you may feel that way, but to me, never mind. I can't say this to our chief and leader. I don't want to make you look like the little boy I remember. Back in the day when your Uncle Giovanni was still running the numbers rackets, and you were a runner. I mean, wait,
okay,
never mind.
Is there anything...
Never mind.
That's it for this show, everyone. Is there anything you'd like to say? Close
yes.
on, Charles? Yeah.
Yes, indeed I would. There's a lot of stuff. We can't say most of it because we run out of time. But what I would like everyone to know while we're in this wonderful lockdown, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you're deprived of the sacraments, you know what it's like to be outside the church. Most of your non-Catholic friends have no idea of what they're missing. You know what you're missing. So when this pandemic is over, we need to redouble our efforts to bring those we love to the very means of life.
This has been, it's strange because it's not Lent, but feels incredibly penitential. I didn't have a great Lent this year, to be honest, but this time that we're going through now feels like a rough Lent.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's proper to feel that way or to treat it penitential in that way, but I don't know. That's where my mind goes.
You've got to. There are several different things to be borne in mind at once, and they are. Number one, the best way to deal with a disaster or pandemic of any kind is as cheerfully as possible. That's on the one hand, but on the other hand, it also has to be accepted that these things don't come to us from God as blessings. Now, I've had people say to me, Well, do you think this is some sort of a punishment from God? And my response is always the same. Well, it sure ain't a blessing. I mean, it's not a reward. So you have these two different, seemingly contradictory things to bear in mind. One is that you should try to be as cheerful and happy about it as you can. But two, you've also got to sort of take it as a penance.
To me, the way I've handled it in my mind, it's like my dad dying.
Now,
You can go either way. You can get stronger from it, and motivate yourself to action in a way that perhaps it wasn't previously possible without that catalyst. Or you can, I don't know, fall apart in the ways that people fall apart, whether it's drinking or whatever.
yeah.
And so too with this, right? This is like being molded in fire, are you just gonna... It's an act of will. It's a choice for each of us which way we're going to go. Or is this going to drive us to action, or is this going to just deter us from saying, "Oh, it's hopeless"?
And
it's hard.
It's very hard, and it's a huge temptation. But I can say, after 2 months of lockdown, which is just starting to ease up now here, because we locked down before you did, I think. We locked down March 16th.
Yeah, that's about when we did.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
But, we're loosening up now. But, of course, they're warning us that if there's any kind of an uptick in the numbers, they'll slam down again. So who knows? We'll see. But just remember, ladies and gentlemen, God is still in charge. Never forget that. We're going through all of this for a purpose, for a reason. We don't know what it is necessarily, but we will get through it. I don't know what it's going to be like on the other end. Certainly a lot of our favorite restaurants and places like that, businesses will be gone, which is why you need to do what you can for them now. But just as with 9/11, the effects remain, but the immediacy is forgotten. That'll be the same with this. In 10 years, we'll be doing some other drivel. God knows what. I remember New Year's Eve 1999 to 2000. I went out with, Brother Leonard Mary and Bonnie Callahan to a Japanese restaurant, the late lamented Miyako in Pasadena. And there was this old Jewish fellow who was in his 90s and his Japanese wife. And I don't know why he asked me this question. It was apropos of nothing, but he says, "So tell me, sir, what do you think we can expect out of this new millennium, this new century, this new decade, this new year?" And I left my tarot cards at home. I didn't have my crystal ball. It was bad. So I finally looked at him and I said, "More of the same, only worse." And he looked at me and he says, "Well, can't we at least hope for peace?" I said, "Sure. Hope for whatever you like. It's the new year. Hope. Hope springs eternal at the new year." And I must say that the 2 decades since then have been a real mixture of good and bad. But that's life. That's life. I had hoped to sneak out of life without going through any more world political events. Doesn't look like I'm going to manage that.
Yeah, I kind of was trying to hope to get through life without any sort of suffering or cross or problems at all, but I don't think it's going to work out.
No, you think that'd be a good deal, but it doesn't happen. But as I say, God knows what he's doing, even if we don't.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, with that, I have a question for you, though.
Go ahead, Charles.
What if this were Monday?
Then it's off the menu.
And the soul you save?
May be your own.
God bless everybody.
Take care.
Take care.